So we do see a lot of transgenic plants in agriculture. So there are like BT corn, golden rice, things like that. BT maize here. So one way is to have a transgenic bacteria infect a plant. Okay, so that is using the bacteria in order to deliver that foreign gene. Scientists can also edit the plant's DNA directly, generally done when it is still a seed. Right? And then the plant will express the foreign gene, so that can give several different benefits, such as it's resistant to a certain insecticide or something like that, pesticide, something like that. Or it can be resistant to frost or a certain parasite or something along those lines. So there are several crops that are now genetically modified, or GM crops. Some of them are on the market, some of them are not. Oftentimes you will hear about several that they'll say something like, oh yeah, you're avoiding GM of this plant, and there's not actually a GM version of that. Anyway, it's a whole huge thing, but genetic engineering trees can also be used to make them more frost resistant, like I talked about with oranges. So that has been a big thing in especially like Florida, where they do grow a lot of orange trees. They have orange groves, and every once in a while get an early frost, which can wipe out a good portion of their produce. It can also increase disease resistance with the American chestnut tree as an example. So if you remember the song Winter Wonderland, chestnuts roasting on an open fire. So we used to have the American chestnut tree all over the U.S., but it got a parasite that started to completely destroy it. And so they have been working on trying to cross it with I believe it's the Chinese chestnut tree, which is resistant to that parasite, in order to preserve the American chestnut tree and allow it to grow again. They can also protect against insects, like for an example with hemlocks and ash trees. So again, obviously don't see those much around this area, but hemlocks are found all over the northwest. So like in the Seattle area, they're the really big trees that kind of they almost kind of look like pines, but not really. There is what's called an aphid, a little bug parasite that leaches the nutrients out of the pine needles on the hemlocks, and basically just starves the tree, and eventually the tree will get to the point where it kind of just falls. And then the cacao plant only grows in specific regions which are threatened by climate change. And so they are working on, again, making it more heat resistant, making it so that it can extract, water from its environment better, different things like that. And you might think, okay, sure, cacao plant, okay, except that is where chocolate comes from. So, yeah, bet you didn't know that chocolate could easily be a casualty of climate change. So, very important research that they are doing there. Yeah, so they are also trying to genetically engineer it so that it can survive not only in its native environment, like where it has been surviving, but also in other environments, so that we can kind of expand its growing capabilities. So transgenic animals are also used to study diseases and gene functions. This generally goes into ethical reasons. Again, can't necessarily study a lot of this with humans. Again, for the ethical concerns, and the different tests that they will do on these animals could result in the animal's death. So yeah, definitely can't do that to humans without major lawsuits. So generally this is done with mice or rats, because they tend to have a lot of similarities with humans in how their diseases progress and things like that. So in this case, they were studying obesity in this mouse. So they gave him a gene for obesity. Again, transgenic mice, often used to study development and disease. And then you can also do what are known as gene knockout mice. So you find the gene in the mice that is similar to the gene you want to study in humans, and you just remove that gene. And then see what happens to the mouse. Now, oftentimes that doesn't work out so well because without the gene, the mice can't survive. So it's kind of a weird thing. Doesn't always work so well. So scientists do have concerns about some of the uses of genetic engineering. Again, genetically modified organisms is a huge, basically hot button topic at the moment. With all these groups coming out and saying that it's horrible for you and the science isn't there and da-da-da-da, and really they don't know what they're talking about because they don't understand science, but for the most part, GMOs are healthy, if not healthier, than a lot of traditionally grown plants. I mean, of course, there is some kind of leeway there, but generally they're as healthy as regular plants. So the whole GMO debate is kind of ridiculous, but they constantly talk about possible long-term health effects from eating GM foods, but GM foods have been on the market for decades, and there hasn't been any proof of any adverse effects in those who eat them versus those who don't. There is no, can't really tell a taste difference, might actually have a better taste, depending on what the modification was, so on and so forth. So, they are also studying possible effects of GM plants on ecosystems and biodiversity to make sure that it's not actually impacting the environment in which they're grown. And that is it for this section.